It started with a growl, low, urgent, and impossible to ignore. In the dead of night, while the world outside slept beneath frost-covered roofs, a golden retriever named Max stood guard beside a baby's crib. No one saw the danger. No one smelled the gas. No one, but him. Within minutes, the house would explode. But first, Max would make a choice, one that would defy every doubt, rewrite every assumption, and prove that sometimes, the difference between tragedy and miracle, walks on four legs. What if the one you almost gave away, was the only reason you're still alive? Stay with us to witness a story of instinct, redemption, and the dog who refused to be ignored. Nora Whitaker wasn't a woman easily shaken. Standing at 5 feet 8 inches, she was lean from years of early morning jogs and chasing toddlers at her part-time job as a preschool teacher. Her dark auburn hair was always tied into a no-nonsense braid that hung between her shoulder blades. Though often quiet in conversation, she was perceptive, one of those rare people who listened more than they spoke. Life hadn't spared her hardship. She'd lost her mother to cancer at 17 and carried a quiet strength since, the kind born from learning how to hold her father together while managing her own grief. That night, she awoke with a start. The growl was low, guttural, like the rumble of distant thunder, but it came not from the sky, but from the foot of the bed. The bedroom was cloaked in shadow, but the moonlight slipping between the heavy curtains outlined the shape of Max, their golden retriever. Max was no ordinary dog. At 3 years old, he was built broad and strong, his golden coat darker than most of his breed, with a stripe of paler fur down his chest like a bolt of lightning. His eyes, deep and intelligent, flicked between the hallway and the nursery beyond. His ears pinned forward, tail low but tense. He looked more statue than dog, still, braced, alert. "Ben," Nora whispered, nudging the man beside her. Ben Whitaker stirred, murmuring a tired before rolling onto his back. At 35, Ben was still boyish in face but built with a working man's frame, calloused hands, thick forearms from years of pouring concrete and lugging rebar. His dark hair was tousled from sleep, stubble dusting his jaw. Lately, he'd carried the weight of financial strain like a stone around his neck, but tonight, all that mattered was the sound in the hallway. Max growled again, louder this time, his head swinging toward the nursery, then back toward them. Nora threw back the covers. Her bare feet touched the cold hardwood with a soft thump. "Max," she whispered, stepping closer. But Max didn't respond to her. He remained fixed, eyes drilling into the hallway, muscles coiled. Then, in a movement so fast it startled her, he turned sharply and began pacing between the nursery and the top of the staircase. A sharp bark burst from his chest, jarring Ben fully awake. "What the?" Ben sat up, blinking. "What's he doing?" Nora didn't answer. Something was wrong. She could feel it, thick and heavy in the air. The kind of wrong you don't name because it feels superstitious to do so. As she approached the nursery, the faintest scent tickled her nose, like sulfur, rotten eggs. "Ben," she said, her voice suddenly dry. "Do you smell that?" Ben joined her, sniffing. "I don't." "Wait, yeah. That's gas." Max barked again and lunged forward, toward the crib. Before either of them could react, his powerful jaws clamped onto Caleb's pajama sleeve, not his arm, never the child himself, and gently but urgently pulled their 10-month-old son from the crib. "Max!" Nora shouted, panic cracking her voice like ice. "Hey! No!" Ben was already sprinting, but Max was faster. He moved like a guided missile, Caleb's small body dragging behind him, supported but never jostled. The dog wasn't panicking. He was executing. Hurting. Like instinct and training had collided in one perfect, terrifying moment. Down the hall. Down the stairs. Nora's heart slammed in her chest as she followed. Ben was behind her, his feet loud on the wood. Max reached the back door and nudged Caleb through the oversized dog flap, one they had joked was too big for a normal pet. And then the world exploded. A deep, bone-rattling boom shook the house. The kitchen wall bowed outward with a roar, glass and fire erupting like breath from a dragon's lungs. Nora screamed as the blast sent her sprawling into the wet grass, Ben landing beside her. Heat and light wrapped around them in a hellish embrace before vanishing into cold night again. She scrambled to her knees. "Caleb," she screamed. There, in the middle of the yard, Max stood, singed but unbroken, his thick fur blackened in patches, one paw lifted off the scorched earth. Beneath him, Caleb wailed, terrified but whole. Nora crawled to them, her arms reaching out, tears already mixing with ash on her cheeks. "He saved him," she whispered hoarsely, wrapping both arms around her child, her whole body trembling. Ben collapsed next to her, pulling them both close, eyes wide in disbelief. Max lay beside them, tongue out, panting heavily, his eyes never leaving Caleb's face. Sirens would follow. Neighbors would emerge. Paramedics would check their vitals. But for now, the world narrowed to this, a family of 3 huddled in a yard, and a 4th, on 4 legs, watching over them with the steady silence of a guardian. Brattleboro's morning had never felt so quiet. A thin sheet of frost glazed the front lawns, and what little remained of the Whittaker home stood dark and splintered, a blackened skeleton against the pale winter sky. A cold breeze whispered through the husks of what used to be windows, carrying with it the acrid scent of smoke and scorched wood. Across the street, Nora sat on the edge of a twin-sized bed in the guest room of Mrs. Ellery's house, her arms wrapped tightly around baby Caleb. Mrs. Ellery, a retired librarian in her late 70s, was a woman of narrow frame and swift practicality. Her gray hair was always tied up in a bun, and her oversized knit sweaters looked like something pulled from a 1970s pattern book. She didn't speak much, but her kindness radiated in small, deliberate gestures, a mug of chamomile tea on the nightstand, fresh sheets tucked around the guest bed, a thick quilt stitched by hand. Nora hadn't slept. Not really. She'd spent the night watching Caleb breathe. Her son, barely 10 months old, cheeks now flushed pink from crying, was curled beside her, wrapped in a borrowed onesie with ducks on it, 2 sizes too big. His tiny fists kept curling toward her shirt in sleep, as if checking that she was still there. Max lay at the foot of the bed, his body tense even as he rested. The golden sheen of his fur was marred with streaks of soot, and one of his paws trembled every so often, involuntarily. Yet his eyes remained alert, flicking to every creak, every footstep. He hadn't left Caleb's side since the explosion. Ben sat across the room on a wooden chair, shoulders hunched, elbows on his knees. He hadn't shaved. He hadn't spoken much. His hands were blackened with soot, nails rimmed in ash. Nora could see the weight of guilt hanging off him like a wet coat. He kept staring at Max. "You were going to give him away," she said finally, not looking at him. Ben didn't answer right away. He let the words settle into the room like dust. "Yesterday," he murmured. "I texted Adam about rehoming him. I thought he was too unpredictable. Too much." Nora turned to look at him slowly, her voice flat. "Too much." Ben's jaw worked, but no words came out. Max stirred, raising his head. "Too much barking. Too much pacing. Too much warning us," she added bitterly. "I didn't think he was warning us," Ben said, quieter now. "I thought he was jealous of the baby. Or anxious. You know, overprotective. He was trying to tell us something," Nora said, her voice cracking. "He was trying to save us before the house even blew." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound Caleb's soft breathing and Max's quiet huff of breath. Mrs. Ellery knocked gently and peeked in. "The fire marshal's outside," she said softly. "Says he has questions." Ben nodded and stood. Nora reached for Max's leash, but the dog was already rising, alert. Outside, the frost crunched underfoot. A dark blue county SUV sat at the curb, and beside it stood Dennis Caldwell, fire marshal, mid-40s, sturdy in a no-nonsense way. He wore a heavy canvas jacket over a navy polo embroidered with the county seal and had a notepad in one gloved hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker," he greeted, voice low and even. "Glad to see you're all right." Nora nodded. Ben looked at the ground. Dennis flipped open his notepad. "I need to ask a few things about the last 24 hours. Anything unusual before the fire? Smells? Flickering lights? Appliances acting up?" "There was a smell," Nora said. "Rotten eggs. Last night. Very faint. We only noticed it because Max did." Dennis looked down at the dog. "This him?" Ben nodded. "He barked. Growled. Scratched at the nursery vent," Nora said. "He let us out before the explosion." Dennis let out a slow whistle and scribbled something down. "That's impressive. That kind of reaction, he trained." They hesitated. Nora spoke first. "No. I mean, he was a rescue. From the Brattleboro shelter." Dennis crouched beside Max, who regarded him with calm, intelligent eyes. "I've seen dogs like this. The way they position themselves, respond to smells. They're usually not just house pets. Might be worth checking his records." Ben looked up, frowning. "You think he was trained for this?" "Might have washed out of a program," Dennis said. "Happens more than people think. A dog doesn't pass a final test, they rehome him." Nora felt a cold chill under her coat. She remembered the way Max always stood between Caleb and the front door. How he perked up when sirens passed. The time he barked at the oven when it had a faulty pilot light. Dennis stood. "We're checking the gas lines. Could have been a pressure leak from the basement." "Do you know what kind of heater you had?" "Water heater was new," Ben said. "Installed last winter." "Could have been a bad fitting," Dennis muttered. "We'll know more later. But it's a miracle you got out. And it sounds like this guy's the reason." He gave Max a nod and left to rejoin his team. Ben and Nora stood in silence a while longer. Then Ben pulled out his phone. On the screen was a message thread with Adam. "Still want the dog? Might be better for us all." The timestamp was from 4:02 p.m. The day before the fire. Ben exhaled sharply and deleted the thread. That night, back at Mrs. Ellery's, Nora set up Caleb's travel crib in the guest room. Max paced near the door, eyes flicking to every shadow. The house creaked like old wood does when it's hiding something. Nora sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes on the monitor. "Max," she whispered. He came to her side, leaned his head on her lap. She stroked the singed fur behind his ears. "You knew," she murmured. "Didn't you?" Max didn't make a sound. He simply pressed closer, his body warm against her legs. Outside, the Vermont wind swept across the snow-dusted yard, whispering through naked branches like a warning carried by the trees. The moon hung low and swollen, casting pale light on the roof of Mrs. Ellery's house, where icicles clung like jagged teeth. Inside, the walls groaned with the pressure of age and cold. The radiator hissed and popped, trying to keep the old bones of the farmhouse warm. Nora lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her arms wrapped protectively around Caleb who slept soundly beside her. Across the room, Ben's soft snoring came in uneven breaths, the weariness of guilt and exhaustion weighing down his frame. But it was Max she watched the most. The golden retriever lay curled at the foot of the bed, his eyes open, ears twitching with every creak. He hadn't slept. Not truly. He watched the room as though expecting something to return. And at 12:42 a.m., it did. A sound, soft at first. A scratch. Slow, deliberate. Faint. Then again. Nora froze, her muscles tensing beneath the quilt. Her breath caught. It wasn't wind. It wasn't the house settling. It was too rhythmic. She turned toward the baby monitor. Caleb breathed evenly, peacefully. Then Max's body stiffened, nostrils flaring. He stood without a sound, moving toward the door like a shadow slipping between beams of light. "Ben," Nora hissed, nudging him. He blinked awake, confused. What? "Listen," she whispered. And then it came again. Scratch. 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 Louder this time. More urgent. Max barked once, sharp, piercing. Caleb stirred, his tiny fists curling. Ben sat up fully, instincts kicking in. "Where's that coming from?" Max sprinted down the hallway. The scratch was louder now, like claws on wood. Not frantic, but insistent. "It's coming from downstairs," Nora said, already scooping Caleb into her arms. Ben grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door, an old keepsake from college games. He met Nora's eyes, heart pounding. "Stay here." But Nora was already moving behind him. Like hell. Max barked again, this time from the kitchen. As they rounded the hallway, they saw him pawing at the door to the basement. "That door was closed," Ben said. "I locked it before we went to bed," Nora added. Max growled low in his throat and struck the wood with his front paws. Ben turned the knob. Unlocked. Nora clutched Caleb tighter, stepping back. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but black. Ben flicked the light switch. Nothing. The bulb at the bottom of the stairs had died sometime in the last few weeks. No one had replaced it. "Max, wait," Ben said, but the dog had already disappeared into the dark, tail rigid, head low. Ben hesitated, then descended. Each step groaned under his weight. The air grew colder, heavier. A smell lingered at the base of the stairs, not strong, not immediate, but enough to make his stomach tighten. Damp earth, old wood, and something else. Bitter. Sharp. He reached the floor and squinted. Max was across the room near the water heater, his nose pressed to the pipe. He barked. Once. Twice. Then again. Ben moved closer. That's when he heard it, the hiss. Barely audible over the hum of the furnace. A soft whisper like air being let out of a balloon. He crouched beside the water heater, eyes scanning. And there it was. A fine crack at a connecting valve, a thread-thin stream of gas seeping out. Ben's lungs seized. "Oh my God," he whispered, backing away. He bounded up the stairs, 2 at a time. "Nora, out. Now." She didn't ask why. She grabbed her coat, wrapped Caleb tighter, and sprinted toward the door. Ben grabbed the dog leash as Max bolted up beside him. Go, go, go. They tumbled into the night air just as a rumble passed through the ground beneath them. No explosion, thank God, but the pressure was building. Mrs. Ellery came out in her robe and slippers, startled. What on earth? There's a leak. Nora shouted, breath catching. Your basement, gas leak. Her face went pale. My God. Ben stood doubled over on the lawn, hands on his knees, gulping cold air. Max stood beside him, panting heavily, fur damp with sweat, gaze locked on Caleb like a lighthouse never looking away from shore. Mrs. Ellery clutched her chest. That dog, he's not just a dog. Ben nodded, chest still heaving. No. He's not. Later that morning, the fire department arrived again. This time, for a leak. Not a fire. No loss, no flames, no screaming wind of glass and heat. Just a silent, invisible killer caught in time. Marshal Dennis was back, this time in jeans and a Carhartt jacket. He examined the valve, nodding slowly. Faulty fitting, he said. Slow leak. Probably started just a few days ago. Could have killed everyone in their sleep. Nora sat on the porch with Caleb in her lap, silent. Her eyes kept drifting toward Max, who lay at her feet like a soldier on post. You said he came from the Brattleboro shelter? Dennis asked, crouching down beside the dog again. She nodded. Check their intake records, he said. There's no way this dog didn't come from some kind of training. He didn't just learn this on his own. Ben stood nearby, hands in his coat pockets. He hadn't spoken much since the night before. But something in him was shifting. Guilt was still there, but so was awe. Later that evening, while Caleb slept in a makeshift crib and Mrs. Ellery quietly knit by the fire, Nora sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. She found the adoption email. A scanned intake form from the shelter. Her heart stopped when she saw a line at the bottom she had never noticed before. Previously evaluated for specialized detection training. Notes available upon request. Nora called the number listed. A calm woman's voice answered on the second ring. Pacific Northwest Search and Rescue. This is Catherine. Nora's throat tightened. Hi. I'm calling about a dog. His name is Max. I think he might be more than just a family pet. There was a pause on the line. Then, you're not the first person to ask about him. The sun in Brattleboro cut through the morning fog like a quiet apology. Thin beams poured through the lace curtains in Mrs. Ellery's kitchen, illuminating motes of dust that danced above the cracked tile counters. A kettle hissed gently on the stove, the scent of cinnamon and burnt toast curling through the air. It was the first morning since the explosion that didn't feel like a warning. But Nora's stomach was still tight, her thoughts strung like clotheslines between dread and clarity. She sat at the table, fingers drumming beside her coffee. Her legal pad lay open, pages already filled with questions. Who trained him? Why was he rehomed? What happens now? Across from her sat Ben, bleary-eyed but dressed. He'd showered for the first time in 3 days. His hair was damp and combed back, but the bruise under his right eye, earned when he tripped hauling Max out of the smoky hallway, still lingered purple and raw. His calloused hands were wrapped around a chipped mug like it held answers instead of lukewarm coffee. Max lay beneath the table, head resting on his paws, tail flicking once every few minutes as if punctuating their silence. The phone buzzed beside the notepad. Nora snatched it up before the second vibration. Pacific Northwest SAR HQ, Catherine Reeves. She took a breath, then answered. This is Nora. Catherine's voice was steady and warm, with the faintest rasp of someone used to radios and late-night calls. We pulled the records, she said. His name in our files was Maverick. That ring a bell? Nora blinked, stunned. Maverick? That's what we called him during initial training. Gas and Chemical Detection Unit. Brilliant nose. Scores through the roof. Ben's eyes narrowed, listening. Then why was he released? Nora asked. There was a pause. He was too independent, Catherine said simply. Didn't wait for commands. Acted on instinct. Normally a deal-breaker. Is that a bad thing? Ben cut in, leaning toward the phone. Not in your case, Catherine replied. In yours, it saved your lives. Listen, would you consider bringing him in? I'd like to see how he's doing. Maybe run a few diagnostics. No pressure. Just, understand what he remembers. Nora exchanged a glance with Ben. When? She asked. We're in Montpelier. Tomorrow afternoon work. Yes, Nora said. We'll be there. Montpelier sat nestled like a forgotten postcard in the Green Mountains, quiet, clean, with buildings that looked as if they'd been painted yesterday. The search and rescue facility was a squat concrete building just off Route 2, surrounded by forest and silence. A metal sign out front read Pensar K9 Division in weather-worn stenciling. Nora drove. Ben sat in the back with Caleb. Max rode in the cargo space, calm, but alert. When the SUV pulled into the gravel lot, Max sat up straighter, ears perked. "Looks familiar," Ben muttered. They were met at the door by Catherine Reeves, a woman in her mid-50s with a long braid, slate-gray eyes, and the kind of no-nonsense grace that made Nora straighten without thinking. She wore jeans, hiking boots, and a windbreaker embroidered with the SAR insignia. "You must be Max," she said, crouching down. Max approached without hesitation. He sniffed her fingers, then licked them once, gently. His eyes met hers. "Still got that look," she murmured. "What look?" Ben asked. "The kind that says, I already solved the problem. You just haven't caught up yet." Inside, the facility smelled like pine cleaner and wet fur. Catherine led them to a training yard where two other handlers waited, Lucas, a lanky man in his 30s with wire-rimmed glasses and a permanent coffee stain on his shirt, and Amina, a short, solid woman with a sharp jawline and quicker hands. They clipped a soft harness onto Max, who allowed it without resistance. Catherine looked to Nora and Ben. "We're going to run a few basics. Scent detection, response time, handler proximity. You okay watching?" Nora nodded. Ben adjusted Caleb on his hip. Lucas placed a sealed canister beneath a barrel 50 yards away. Max's leash was unclipped. "Find," Catherine said. Max bolted. No hesitation. He circled twice, nose low, then sat beside the correct barrel and barked once. Lucas opened the lid. Found it. Amina placed a second canister, this time hidden behind an obstacle wall. Max didn't even flinch. "He remembers everything," Catherine said quietly. "All the drills. All the protocol. He's still got the training burned in." Ben leaned forward. "Then why didn't he finish the program?" Lucas answered this time. "He didn't wait. He was too fast. Sometimes that's good. But in the field, it's dangerous if the dog acts before the handler confirms. We couldn't guarantee he wouldn't leap into a chemical zone too soon. But with us," Nora began. Catherine nodded. "With you, it's different. He isn't just working. He's watching over. You're not his mission. You're his family." Later, they sat inside the break room, drinking vending machine coffee while Max sprawled on the floor with Caleb crawling over him like a jungle gym. "We'd like to offer a partnership," Catherine said. "Not formal SAR certification, but integrated family training. We'll teach you to understand his body language, his signs. If you're willing." Ben looked down at Max, who gently licked Caleb's ear. "I wanted to give him away," he said softly. Catherine didn't flinch. "You wouldn't be the first. Dogs like this aren't always easy." "But he didn't give up on us," Nora said. Her voice caught. "No," Catherine agreed. "He didn't." That evening, back in Brattleboro, Mrs. Ellery met them at the porch with fresh banana bread. She crouched beside Max, whispering, "You've got secrets in your bones, boy. But you're exactly where you need to be." Inside the house, Ben sat on the floor, watching Caleb play with a plastic block while Max lay nearby. "You think we can really do this?" he asked Nora. She joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "We already are." Outside, the night was quiet. But Max didn't sleep. He sat at the window, watching the dark like he always did, alert, patient, waiting. A low January sun skimmed the horizon, painting the snow-covered backyards of Brattleboro in a gold so soft it looked borrowed from memory. The Whitakers' rental house, small, drafty, but theirs, buzzed with new energy. The scent of sawdust still lingered from Ben's recent repairs, mixing with baby wipes, toasted oats, and something else, anticipation. It was a house on the cusp of transformation. In the backyard, Caleb squealed with delight as he waddled over a tiny orange traffic cone. Max shadowed him, his massive golden frame moving with measured grace, like a lion pretending to be a nursemaid. Every time Caleb stumbled, Max shifted closer, his nose brushing the toddler's shoulder to steady him. From the porch, Catherine Reeves watched the scene unfold beside Nora, who was biting her lower lip, half amazed, half overwhelmed. Catherine was dressed in her usual forest green windbreaker, clipboard in hand. She wore tinted glasses now, giving her an aviator edge that matched her tone, calm, prepared, always 2 thoughts ahead. He adjusts to the child's speed, Catherine said, making a note. Keeps within 1.5 strides at all times. That's good? Nora asked. Catherine smiled faintly. That's exceptional. Some dogs need 6 months of training to learn that. Max remembers. Behind them, Lucas, the tall, rail-thin trainer with the coffee-stained hoodie, finished setting up the agility course. It consisted of low hurdles, tunnels, and scent cones arranged in a loop that Max had never seen before. Ben came outside holding 2 travel mugs. He looked different now, still a construction worker in denim and fleece, but with less tension in his shoulders. He handed Nora her coffee and stood beside her, watching Max nudge Caleb gently toward a small plastic slide. He's more careful with the baby than I am, Ben murmured. Max was never the reckless one, Nora replied quietly. Catherine clapped her hands. All right, let's bring him in. Time to switch from babysitting to working. Nora called, Max, come. The golden retriever turned immediately, trotting toward them, tail wagging. Caleb let out a wail at the departure but was quickly distracted by Lucas offering a bubble wand. Max sat by Nora's side, ears up, eyes sharp. Today, Catherine began, we'll train you both to read each other. Body language. Micro cues. Dogs like Max communicate all the time. People just don't always speak their language. They started with scent cones, each containing a sealed vial of harmless chemical compounds similar to what Max had once trained with. 1 in 6 cones had the target scent. The others were controls. Catherine led Max on a leash while Nora followed closely behind, her hand gently resting on the harness. Watch his tail, his shoulders. You'll see the difference when he hits the right one, Catherine instructed. Max sniffed the first cone. Pause. No response. Second. Same. Third. His tail stiffened, nostrils flared. His paws planted wider, his neck lowered slightly. That's it, Nora whispered. Mark it, Catherine instructed. Nora said, alert, and Max barked once. Catherine smiled. Good. Praise him. Nora knelt and cupped Max's face. Good boy, she said softly. Max leaned into her, his tail wagging faster now. After several rounds, they moved on to distraction tests. Lucas walked by with a bouncing soccer ball. Max didn't flinch. Amina rattled a pan from the porch. Max's ears twitched but his eyes stayed on the cones. Focus score is absurd, Lucas muttered, scribbling into his notepad. Then came handler drills. Catherine instructed Ben to take the leash while Nora acted as the scent placer. Ben hesitated. What if I get it wrong, he asked. Catherine looked at him. He won't. They started again. Max moved smoothly, only pausing once to glance back at Ben, as if reassuring him. At cone 5, his posture changed. Ben hesitated, watching. Max flicked his ears, nudged the cone with his paw, then looked back again. Alert, Ben finally said. Max barked. Good, Catherine confirmed. Ben let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. For the first time, he felt it, the bond. Not the guilt, not the awe, but partnership. Inside the house, Caleb napped on a quilt in the living room. Mrs. Ellery sat beside him, her knitting needles clacking softly. Nora and Ben sat at the kitchen table across from Catherine. You've both made huge progress, Catherine said. You're learning to read Max. He's learning to trust your signals, too. Ben rubbed the back of his neck. What happens after this? Catherine shrugged gently. That depends on you. There's no after with a dog like Max. You'll always be growing together. But if you're interested, we can register Max as a family-integrated responder. Like an emotional support dog? Nora asked. More like a hybrid, Catherine replied. He won't wear the vest unless it's needed. But his training will continue, and we'll keep checking in every month. Nora looked at Ben, who nodded slowly. I want to be part of it, he said. This time. Nora reached under the table and squeezed his hand. That weekend, the town held a small community gathering in the church hall to thank the firefighters and recognize Max's role in preventing the gas disaster. The event was modest: folding chairs, homemade pies, a paper banner that read "Thank you, heroes." But the room was packed. Caleb wore a bow tie. Max wore a bandana with the word "Guardian" stitched in blue thread. Carmen, Mrs. Ellery, gave a short, emotional speech, holding her cane like a podium. We've all been through something, she said. But thanks to this dog, we're still here. And maybe, just maybe, we'll start listening to our animals better. The crowd laughed softly, then clapped loud and long. Max barked once and sat like a king. Ben stood in the back, one hand on Caleb's stroller, the other in his pocket, jaw tight. When people came up to shake his hand or touch Max's fur, he smiled, nodded. But mostly, he watched. When it was over, and the crowd thinned, Ben turned to Nora. You know. I thought I was the one protecting this family. But Max, he's been doing it the whole time. Nora leaned in. Now you're doing it together. Ben nodded. Yeah. We are. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft, drifting flakes that clung to Max's coat as he led them home. Not out in front, not behind. But beside. By mid-March, Brattleboro was thawing. Snowmelt trickled down gutters and soaked into thawed soil. Crocuses peeked tentatively through the dead grass, and the scent of damp wood filled the air. The world was waking up again, and so were the Whitakers. Their new house, still modest, stood taller than the last, not by architecture, but by intention. Every beam, every pipe, every screw had been double-checked, not by some hired inspector, but by Ben himself. He'd never built anything before with his own hands, but now he touched every board as if it were a vow. Inside, Max moved with confidence. No longer pacing nervously at shadows, he now patrolled with assurance. He had a job, a role. He wasn't just tolerated, he was trusted. The golden bandana around his neck read "Family Safety Dog" in stitched navy thread, a term that had once made Ben scoff but now made his throat tighten. That morning, sunlight spilled across the living room floor where Caleb waddled unsteadily toward a tower of blocks. He tumbled halfway, letting out a startled whimper before Max nudged him back up with his nose. Nora, seated on the floor folding laundry, smiled gently. Max had become more than a guardian, he was Caleb's silent shadow, soft enough to carry him, strong enough to stop a disaster. Ben entered, wiping his hands with a cloth. He'd been fixing the new fence, installing a locking gate after catching Caleb halfway across the yard last week. It's coming together, he said. Nora nodded. Not just the house. Ben dropped onto the couch beside her. You ever think about what would have happened if Max hadn't? Every day, she said, not looking away from Caleb. But I try not to live there. They sat quietly. The silence wasn't tense anymore. It was earned. Later that afternoon, Catherine Reeves returned for her final check-in. She came alone this time, her windbreaker traded for a light denim jacket, clipboard tucked under one arm. Max looks good, she said after a brief greeting, watching him circle the backyard with his usual care. He owns the place, Ben said with a grin. We just rent. Catherine laughed softly. I wanted to tell you in person, we've officially added Max to our pilot list of home-integrated safety responders. You're the first family on record. Nora blinked. Wait, like, official? Catherine nodded. He's not a service dog. Not a SAR. But what you three have built here, it works. He detects, he protects, and most importantly, he's bonded. That's irreplaceable. Ben looked at Max, who had flopped down beside Caleb and was letting the toddler stack blocks on his head. So, we're a case study, he asked. A successful one, Catherine said, then leaned forward. We want to learn from you. Build this model. Maybe save more families who almost missed the warning. Nora swallowed. We almost gave him away. But you didn't, Catherine said. You listened. Eventually. As the afternoon wore on, they went through one last series of drills, simulated alarms, hidden scent canisters in the garden, and silent hand signals from Ben. Max passed every test, then trotted straight to Caleb for a nap. That evening, they held a small dinner. Just the Whitakers, Mrs. Ellery, and Catherine. There was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and Nora's slightly overbaked peach cobbler. Caleb gurgled in his high chair, throwing pieces of bread at Max, who caught them with quiet dignity. At one point, Mrs. Ellery raised her glass, a small sherry. To Max, she said, voice cracking slightly. The best boy I've ever met who can't talk, but somehow says everything. They all raised their glasses. Ben stepped outside afterward, standing alone on the porch as the stars blinked awake in the sky. Max joined him, lying at his feet. Ben took a slow breath. I was so close, buddy, he said softly. One text away from losing you. And now. He crouched and pressed his forehead gently to Max's. Now I owe you everything. Max didn't move. Just breathed. From behind the screen door, Nora called, Come in, boys. Caleb's asking for you. Ben stood, brushing off his knees. Come on, partner. Let's go home. Max rose and followed, shoulder to shoulder. 6 months later, the rebuilt house stood proud. The lawn had filled in, green and stubborn. A wooden plaque hung near the front steps. Home of Max, family safety dog, trained by love. On weekends, local families came by for demonstrations, new parents, firefighters, school teachers. Catherine returned monthly to monitor Max and help the Whitakers teach others. Ben spoke more now, he even gave talks about trusting instincts, learning to listen, and second chances. Caleb had begun forming full sentences. One of his first was, Max help me. He said it when he fell. When he was scared of thunder. When he had nightmares. And Max always came. One night, after a day filled with visits and laughter, Ben sat beside Nora on the porch steps. Max lay nearby, head on his paws, watching the moon. You know, Ben said, voice low, I used to think being a protector meant doing everything yourself. Fixing things. Holding it all together. Nora leaned into him. But that's not real. No, he said. Protection is listening. It's knowing when something's wrong, even if no one else sees it. Even if it comes on 4 legs. They sat in silence. Max twitched his ears. Inside, Caleb murmured in his sleep. Max stood slowly and padded toward the window, pausing for a moment to look back. Ben smiled. Still on duty, huh? The golden retriever didn't respond. He didn't need to. Sometimes the most important voices in our lives don't use words at all. Max had no way to explain what he sensed, no language to plead, no logic to persuade. Only growls. Only pacing. Only presence. But when it mattered most, his actions cut through the noise, saving an entire family who nearly dismissed him as, just a dog. This story isn't just about instincts. It's about second chances. About learning to hear what we've ignored. To slow down. To pay attention. To trust the quiet signals, whether from a loyal dog, a loved one, or even our own hearts. Max didn't need training to care. He didn't need permission to act. He only needed one thing, a family willing to listen. Have you ever ignored a warning sign? Missed a silent cry for help? Maybe now's the time to listen more closely, to your loved ones, to your instincts, to the quiet protectors around you. If this story moved you, share it. Comment below how an animal has ever changed your life, or maybe even saved it. Because sometimes, the smallest bark can be the loudest miracle.